Hello and welcome to our webinar, The Growing Complexity of International Trade. My name is Steve Fodor. I'm with the Association for Trade Compliance and also Trade Logic International. And I welcome you to our webinar today, and I'm hopeful over the next 30 minutes I can give you information that will help you to help your business grow and protect you from any issues with U.S. Customs. Importing into the U.S. can be quite complicated, and it's growing more complex every day. We'll talk about the changing face of importing into the United States. U.S. Congress has ordered U.S. Customs to take action to facilitate legitimate trade while at the same time enforcing all applicable rules and regulations. The Trade Facilitation and Trade Enforcement Act of 2015 was passed by Congress and recently signed into law. That was in February of this year. And under the TFTEA, this dual focus for U.S. Customs to facilitate and enforce has been written into law. Customs has been given a new computer tool called ACE. And ACE, the Automated Commercial Environment, is a tool that allows Customs to better enforce the many rules and regulations. We expect to see a surge in the number of civil and criminal penalties, even for actions that are simply negligent. The Department of Justice is working with U.S. Customs and other federal agencies to help take action against those who violate these rules and regulations. It's important to note that recently the Department of Justice has taken action that has pierced the corporate veil, allowing the DOJ to take action against individuals such as company presidents, vice presidents, chairmen, etc., for negligent action or grossly negligent action involving importing into the U.S. It's important to note, ignorance of the law is no excuse. Customs will not allow an importer to say that, well, we didn't know the rules, we didn't know the regulations, therefore please reduce our penalty. You're not going to get mitigation by claiming ignorance. Every importer, large or small, whether it's one shipment a year or 10,000 shipments a year, is fully expected to know all the rules and regulations governing their imported products and to take whatever steps are necessary to ensure their company is in compliance. One of the key driving factors behind the changes that are occurring with U.S. Customs is the Trade Facilitation and Trade Enforcement Act of 2015. This was signed into law February of 2016. And with this law, Congress has told Customs, we want to give you a two-part mission. We want you to continue to enforce trade law and protect and secure our borders. And we also want you to be able to facilitate trade for legitimate importers, companies that have a good track record with Customs. This is a restructuring of Customs' approach to handling import shipments. It gives them a greater incentive to identify those imports and importers who may be a problem, who may have shipments where they're not paying the correct duty amounts. Perhaps there's some negligence going on or even fraud where a company that is importing is not making the proper declarations to U.S. Customs. And Congress has given Customs new technology and new tools to use to facilitate and enforce these trade laws. This new technology, which we're going to discuss on a slide in just a few minutes, gives Customs a greater visibility and a better ability to track importers who have had problems in the past and give extra attention to those importers on their future shipments as well. We're going to talk about something I call the bucket approach. With Customs resources being relatively limited, there has to be a way that they can target importers who are likely to be a problem while allowing trade for importers who have a much better approach to the rules and regulations. So in this bucket approach, Customs is labeling importers either low risk, which is a very good thing, or high risk, which, as we'll see, can be a very costly and very bad thing for importers. I mentioned that Congress has given customs new tools to help them in their mission to enforce trade rules and regulations. And the primary tool is what we call ACE, or the Automated Commercial Environment. This is a modernized computer system that is available to U.S. Customs, giving them much greater visibility regarding import shipments and all the data that flows in. Customs is better able to analyze that data. And I will say this, with greater visibility for U.S. Customs and for other government agencies, it also brings a greater ability for customs and those agencies to identify and target potential problem shipments and also to enforce all the applicable trade rules and regulations. There's much more visibility and oversight that allows the PGAs, or partner government agencies, to be able to review shipment data and also enforce the rules and regulations that apply in particular to those government agencies. We'll talk a little bit more about that on a slide in just a few moments. This new system allows customs a better way to be able to flag or target importers who have had issues with customs or trade violations in the past, and then focus more enforcement attention on those importers. You don't want to be flagged. That's definitely a negative thing. And ACE is still a new system, and its use is growing every day. And the more the use of the ACE system grows, the more customs becomes familiar with the system and how to best use it for their purposes. We can likely see a much larger number of trade enforcement actions occurring over the next few months and on through the next few years as well. Customs uses the ACE system to route import trade data into what they call the Centers of Excellence and Expertise, or Cs, and we'll talk about those more on a slide momentarily. All right, let's talk a bit about the PGAs, or Partner Government Agencies. These are U.S. federal agencies that have regulatory oversight over imported products, and there are about 47 government agencies today that have at least some regulatory oversight over some imported products. I've listed some of the agencies there, like the FDA, the FCC, and others, and you may know them by those acronyms. I want to highlight two agencies there, one being the FDA, or Food and Drug Administration, and the other being the last on the list, the CPSC, or Consumer Product Safety Commission. Those two agencies alone have a very broad oversight on imported products. The FDA is involved not only with food and drugs, as per their name, but also pet foods and even any product that has use in either the food industry or in the medical industry. Things like plates, dishes, cups, saucers, those are all food items and under FDA regulation. And the Consumer Product Safety Commission is involved in consumer safety, as their name says. And any product, you could say, could pose a safety issue. Therefore, the CPSC has very broad oversight on imported products. And that's important to know. You'd be surprised how often your product may fall under their oversight, and you wouldn't even think that possibly. U.S. Customs acts as the enforcement arm for all of these partner government agencies. However, it's the agency that usually knows and understands their own rules and regulations. Working with the ACE system, these partner government agencies can now clearly review and have clear visibility to see import shipment data. So there'll be a lot more targeting going on by those agencies for the rules and regulations they enforce. It's very difficult to determine the applicable rules and regulations for a given import product. That's one of the big challenges with being an importer in the U.S. As I've said before, even though you may say you don't know the rules and regulations, the penalties can be severe and your shipments can even be denied entry into the United States. These rules and regulations are constantly changing, and importers are required to be aware of those changes and take them into account with their compliance programs. Enforcement actions and penalties will likely increase now that these partner government agencies have a much clearer view of the products that are being imported into the U.S. I had mentioned that Customs is now routing the data electronically through ACE to the Cs, or Centers of Excellence and Expertise. There are 10 Cs around the United States. They're geographically located. However, each C has a particular group of commodities that are under its oversight. So even though your company may be based in New York, if your product is under a C that's based in Los Angeles, that's the C that you will be dealing with. It's not geographically governed, it's governed by the type of product that you import. Every import transaction is now being overseen by the applicable C. As I mentioned above in the title, these are called the Centers of Excellence and Expertise. However, I see them more as expertise and enforcement because that's really one of the goals. With a greater concentration of expertise on each of these C's, there comes a greater ability for them to enforce rules and regulations and also issue penalties for those who are not in compliance. The C's are willing to partner with trusted importers or trusted partners, and at the same time they're looking at other companies that are not a trusted partner, to give them more regulatory oversight and possible enforcement actions. So importers are broken down. You have the legitimate trade, which would be the trusted importers, and then you have the other group, which is everyone else. The C's allow Customs to better use their limited resources to enforce the laws, rules, and regulations while still facilitating trade for those companies that are in compliance with those rules and regulations. So the question I ask is your company a trusted partner with U.S. Customs, or is your company considered an other? I mentioned earlier on that there's a two-bucket approach, as I call it. You have the bucket that is the low risk, which would be the trusted partners, and then you have the bucket that is high risk, and high risk would be all the other importers. Far better to be a trusted partner than to be an other. The trusted partners can expect Customs to help facilitate their trade, make it move faster. Also, that there would be fewer customs examinations, and considering the cost of those examinations, that's a huge benefit. And lower cost overall, again, because you have fewer exams, fewer delays, fewer cost that would be tied to those. Now, the other group will see increased enforcement. They'll see more regulatory oversight, and it's highly likely they'll see more exams and higher costs. You may know that the average customs exam in the U.S. costs over $1,000 per shipment. So, as you can see, the cost is very high. You can take actions today to help your company get in the right bucket. You want to be the trusted partner. So, things that you could consider doing are to obtain your CTPAT certification, to conduct regular self-audits of all of your import transactions. And once you've done those things, you can reach out and contact the C that is assigned to your product group and let them know that you want to be considered a trusted partner and that you're willing to work with that C. This can be very beneficial and help save you big costs down the road. A small investment now can save you a tremendous amount of money in the future. Let's talk briefly about reasonable care and due diligence. Did you know that U.S. Customs expects every U.S. importer, whether they import one shipment a year or 10,000, each importer must exercise due diligence and reasonable care in all of their import transactions. This is a legal obligation for every company that decides to import even one shipment into the U.S. Customs requires that the U.S. importer of record use reasonable care and exercise due diligence to enter their products, to classify their products under the harmonized tariff system, and to determine the proper value to report to Customs for those imported shipments. And here's the key. Customs also expects every importer to provide any other information necessary to enable U.S. Customs, or CBP, to properly assess duties, collect statistics, and determine if any other applicable legal requirements have been met. That's a key. Provide any other information necessary. That's a very broad term, and it can mean a lot of things to a lot of people. But basically, Customs is saying whatever Customs needs to know, it's the importer's responsibility to provide it. I would recommend for every importer, large or small, that you visit the Customs website at www.cbp.gov, and if you go to the address shown on this slide, you can download a PDF document called Reasonable Care, a checklist for compliance. And this will allow you to see exactly what U.S. Customs expects from you as a U.S. importer of record. I think many companies will be quite shocked to find out exactly the demands that are being placed upon them because they are importing into the U.S. Let's talk a bit about uncertainty versus certainty. As a fellow small business owner, I don't like uncertainty. I like to know in my business transactions that everything I'm doing is correct and that I don't have to worry about U.S. Customs or other government agencies knocking on my door and making demands and possibly issuing penalties against me because I didn't do the right thing at the time of that import transaction. So it's critical. You're an importer of record. You want certainty. You want to be able to know what costs are involved in your import shipments. There's no way you can set your proper sales price to your customers if you don't know your total overall cost. And as I mentioned, exams and delays can have very high costs. From what we see, over $1,000 per shipment is very common for one customs examination. If you bring in multiple shipments in a year and you have multiple customs examinations, the costs just pile up. And when we have uncertainties, they cut into our profit margin. And they even reduce our competitive edge. If we can't price our products correctly, our competition may just drive us out of that marketplace. And there are steps you can take, and I mentioned them on a previous slide, that you should do a self-audit of your import processes. And by self-audit, you may want to do that yourselves, or you may want to hire a customs expert to do that audit for you. You should also consider CTPAT certification, and it's critical. It's very critical with U.S. Customs that senior management at your company has oversight over your import transactions. Customs wants you to demonstrate that you understand the rules and regulations, you understand the importance of compliance, and that your company is doing everything possible to comply. Inaction, not doing enough, can show Customs that a company is not exercising reasonable care, and that can open you up to increased penalties. Finally, we all want to control the things we can control. We can't control the weather. We can't control a lot of the delays that we see with a ship arriving in port or a truck has a flat tire. Those are things that are outside of our control. But we can control those things when they involve rules and regulations by making sure we're proactive and that our company is in compliance. Well, there's a nice segue. Let's talk about the benefits of being proactive involving your import transactions versus being reactive. Customs wants to see importers invest the time to know their own imported products. Now that seems like a no-brainer, but shockingly, many importers don't fully understand the products that they import, and they surely don't understand the rules and regulations that may govern those products. Compliance is always the responsibility of the importer. I cannot say that enough. The importer is fully 100% legally responsible and liable for every import that they bring into the U.S. Being proactive is much less costly than having to react when customs is knocking on your door. Due diligence in the eyes of U.S. Customs means that an importer is reviewing their imports, looking for any problems, any mistakes in the documentation or the declarations that are made to Customs, and where they find those, they're taking action to make corrections. Problems that you identify when you're doing a self-audit or when you're having a customs expert audit your import transactions, it's critical that if problems are found, you step back and make some real hard decisions about how to notify customs of what you found. There are some certain legal avenues that need to be taken to protect your company from greater liability. I always recommend, if you identify problems, talk to your customs expert, talk to your customs broker, but ultimately you may need to talk to an attorney who specializes in customs rules and regulations to guide you through the process. Look, certainty is a critical part of your profits, especially when you're an importer. I spoke a bit about the bucket approach, where customs is dividing importers basically into two categories: low risk and high risk. Well, let me say this: there really is no middle ground. Your company is either going to be low risk or they're going to be high risk by default. There's no middle ground. There's no medium risk, or they don't rate risk 1 through 10. You're either in the low risk or the high risk group. Using the ACE system, Customs is able to rate importers and focus on those importers who are considered high risk. So if your company falls into the high risk group, you can expect more customs exams, more customs requests for information, and more delays with your import shipments. Some of the things Customs looks at determining low risk versus high risk include the countries of origin. Where are you buying your products? The suppliers that you use. Do you know your suppliers? Do you know they're based where they say they're based? If they say they're manufacturing at a facility in Thailand, do you know for a fact that they're manufacturing your products in that facility and not somewhere else? You need to know. And every product being imported has different levels of risk. Some products have a lot of regulatory oversight, they're a higher risk, while other products are a little less regulated and therefore lower risk. Here's a point that I think every importer should know. You don't want to have a problem. Problem that an importer has, and by a problem I mean an issue that is brought to their attention by U.S. Customs, perhaps a misclassification or a misdeclaration of value, or maybe you declared the country of origin incorrectly. These can put a red flag on your account with U.S. Customs, and using the ACE system, Customs will be able to see that red flag. Whether you import in New York, LA, Miami, or Atlanta, they're going to see that red flag, and your company will be at more risk to be targeted for examination and delay. And there are steps you can take now to be considered a low risk to U.S. Customs, and we've mentioned them, and I'll mention them briefly again. CTPAT certification, companies that are self-auditing or using an expert to audit their imports. Those are the kinds of things you can do to be considered a lower risk. All right, I've talked quite a bit about the liabilities and responsibilities of importers, but a lot of importers will say, but I use a customs broker, so I'm okay, right? Well, not so much. A customs broker acts as your company's agent. When they sign documents or submit information to customs, they're doing it on your behalf, not their own. So any errors they make, the liability, the responsibility for the customs broker's actions or inactions fall upon the importer. Customs brokers take information that they are given either in documents or maybe received from you electronically by email or through a phone conversation. They take all that information together and they provide it to U.S. Customs. You remember the old saying in the computer industry, garbage in, garbage out. So in other words, if the information the broker is receiving is incomplete or inaccurate, they're going to pass that same incomplete or inaccurate information on to U.S. Customs, and that's a problem for the importer. Customs brokers are there to assist you, but they can't lead you or guide you to the final destination. You as the importer need to take that responsibility upon yourself. A failure to communicate properly with your U.S. Customs broker is one of the most likely causes of errors in your import transactions. Most problems are preventable if you deal with them at the beginning, if you deal at the start, if you deal with them on that first entry. Proactive, not reactive. And finally, U.S. Customs brokers have very limited liability for their errors. Usually their liability is limited to $100 per shipment. So if you get hit with a $10,000 penalty, your broker is only liable for $100 of that penalty. The rest comes out of your pocket. This is an important thing to think about when you're in international shipping. It's like when you buy a shipment and you ship it to the U.S., if you don't have cargo insurance, the liability of the ocean carrier or the airline or the freight forwarder is extremely limited. So you could be on the hook for 95 or 99% of the loss. So uh, just like with cargo insurance, you need to understand where your liabilities are and do everything you can to protect yourself from having to pay these large penalties. All right, we're getting near the end of our webinar, and I want to wrap it up with a few points. So you might be saying, what can I do and what should I do? Well, as I've mentioned, review your supply chain and your import processes. Take a look at your suppliers. Take a look at where you're sourcing your products. Take a look at your products and see what other government agencies have regulatory oversight, and make sure that your products comply with every rule, regulation that applies to that particular product. Know your products. Understand how to classify them in the harmonized tariff schedule of the U.S. This is critical. If you misclassify your goods, everything else falls apart. Classification determines so much regarding an import shipment that improper classification can really cause a lot of other issues in the import process. Talk to your customs broker, or even talk to an expert. An expert would be a customs consultant, such as our company, TradeLogic International. You may even want to talk to a customs attorney. You need to know the federal regulatory agencies that have oversight over the products that you import, and you have to know their rules and regulations. You need to get training, and you need to stay up to date on the changes that are occurring every day with U.S. Customs and these other government agencies and all the rules and regulations. You need to be involved. Upper management, you need to be involved in the day-to-day operations of your import transactions. They have to be done correctly, and you need to be the one to make certain that's happening. And I would strongly urge every importer, large or small, to consider becoming CTPAT certified. For more information about that program, please feel free to contact me, info@aftcompliance.org, and I'd be glad to share CTPAT information with you. All right, as we come to the end of our webinar, I want to take the time to mention the Association for Trade Compliance. This is an association we formed recently that allows importers, suppliers, customs brokers, freight forwarders, and other companies that are involved in international trade to have an association they can join where they can receive information and training opportunities to help them make certain that they are in compliance with all the rules and regulations that we all face. AFTC members receive over 30 training opportunities every year, and that's all included in their annual membership fee. Things like webinars and written training modules. We even have online tests that you can take, and this is a good way for you to prove to customs that you're exercising due diligence and reasonable care. Our training is by industry professionals for industry professionals. Our training is the type of training that you can apply to your day-to-day work processes. We make it easy for you to be able to take our training and find ways to use it every day. It's useful, it's understandable. We don't use a lot of legalese. We don't throw around a lot of terms and technical uh, flim flam that's just going to confuse you. We want you to get training that you can use every day, and that's what AFTC brings to our members. As a member of AFTC, you have regular access through email to our industry professionals. So if you have a specific question regarding your business, we can give you some advice. Now, it's not legally binding advice, but it's good advice, and we can point you in the right direction where you can get the information that you need. We offer discounts on our consulting services through our sister company, TradeLogic International, and we also offer discounts on things like cargo insurance and customs bonds as well. AFTC membership is very affordable and we believe very useful for every company involved in international trade. More information, just contact us, info@aftcompliance.org, and we'd be more than glad to answer any questions you might have. I would encourage you to join AFTC today. And if you do so, as a LinkedIn member, we're happy to offer you a $75 discount off our normal annual membership fee, which is $395 per year. Our training is on demand, meaning it fits your busy schedule. You can train anywhere you have internet access. Our webinars and our training modules are always available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Our training can help your company become a trusted partner with U.S. Customs. We would encourage you to join today, and as you can see, there is a link that will take you to our page and allow you to join. Just use promo code LI2016 and you'll receive $75 off your first year's membership. At AFTC, we like to say we make compliance less complicated. I would encourage you to join today. You may also feel free to email me, info@aftcompliance.org, with any questions you may have. I want to thank you for taking the time to participate in our webinar, and I hope you found it informative. Please join AFTC and take advantage of all of our future webinars as well. Thank you.